The first sign that something was wrong was a red ribbon tied around the brass handle of my front gate. It was a narrow strip of satin, the kind florists use around cellophane-wrapped bouquets. It fluttered in the October wind as if it belonged there, bright against the peeling black paint. I noticed it at 7:15 on a Tuesday morning while carrying a mug of coffee to the mailbox. For 32 years, my mornings had followed roughly the same sequence. I woke before 6, made coffee in the dented stainless steel percolator my wife had refused to replace, read the financial section at the kitchen table, and walked down the stone path to collect the mail. Routine is underrated. People call it dull when what they mean is dependable. That house had been dependable. It was a 2-story colonial outside Hartford, Connecticut. Built in 1948 and renovated in stages whenever I had the money. I had replaced every pipe, rewired every room, reinforced the basement supports, and refinished the oak floors myself. I knew where the walls bowed in winter and which window in the upstairs hallway needed a firm lift before it would lock. My late wife, Margaret, used to say I understood the house better than I understood people. She was probably right. I stood at the gate with my coffee steaming in one hand and studied the ribbon. It had been tied carefully. 2 loops, equal length. A clean knot. Not the work of a child. I untied it and slipped it into my coat pocket. Inside the mailbox were 3 envelopes, a utility bill, and a glossy postcard from a local real estate agency. The postcard showed a smiling woman in a cream-colored blazer standing in front of a house that looked suspiciously like mine. Not exactly mine. The shutters were blue instead of black, and the landscaping had been brightened to an almost radioactive green. But the roofline, front columns, and semicircular window above the door were unmistakable. Across the top, in bold white letters, it read, "Coming soon. A rare opportunity in Westrigi." Turned the postcard over. There was no address, no listing price, only a phone number, and the words, "Private preview by appointment." I read it twice. Then I looked back at my house. The porch light was still on. The maple tree had dropped a thick layer of leaves over the lawn. One of the upstairs curtains hung slightly crooked because I had never bothered to fix the rod after Margaret died. Nothing appeared changed. Still, I had spent 28 years advising banks, small businesses, and occasionally very wealthy men on contracts, asset transfers, and financial exposure. I had learned that major problems rarely announced themselves with sirens. They arrived as discrepancies. A number that did not reconcile. A signature placed half an inch too low. A ribbon tied to a gate. I carried the postcard inside and placed it beside my newspaper. At 8:30, my daughter called. Claire was 34, recently divorced, and living 20 minutes away in a townhouse I had helped her purchase. She worked in pharmaceutical sales, which suited her. She was polished, persuasive, and capable of making concern sound like a professional service. "Morning, Dad," she said brightly. "How are you feeling?" It was an unusual question. "About the same as yesterday. You sound tired." "I've said 9 words. I can hear it in your voice." I glanced at the postcard. "What do I sound like?" She paused. "Just worn down." Claire had been using that phrase more often lately. Worn down, overwhelmed, not quite yourself. Each expression was delivered gently, never as an accusation. That was what made them effective. A direct insult invites resistance. Concern enters through a side door. "I'm making soup tonight," she continued. "I thought I'd bring some over. That's kind of you. And maybe we could go through some things." "What things?" "Just paperwork. Bills. Insurance. Nothing dramatic." I looked toward the study. My bills were paid automatically. My insurance policies were indexed in 2 fireproof cabinets. My will had been revised 9 months earlier. "What made you think my paperwork needed attention?" Another pause, shorter this time. "You mentioned being behind on things." "No, I didn't." "I'm pretty sure you did." "When?" Dad, I don't keep transcripts of our conversations. Neither did I. But I kept notes. It was a habit from years of consulting. After any conversation involving money, property, or liability, I wrote down the date and relevant details. Margaret used to tease me about it. You document breakfast, she once said. Only unusual breakfasts. I may have misunderstood you, Claire said, softening her voice. There's no reason to get defensive. I'm not defensive. You sound defensive. I let the silence sit between us. People reveal a great deal when they rush to fill silence. Claire had inherited that tendency from her mother. Though Margaret filled silence with honesty, Claire filled it with revisions. I'm only trying to help, she said. You know that, right? I know what you're saying. That's a strange answer. It's an accurate one. She gave a small laugh, but there was no amusement in it. I'll come by around 6. All right. And don't worry about dinner. I wasn't worried. Dad. Yes. Please don't make everything difficult. The line went quiet after she hung up. I remained at the kitchen table, holding the phone. The house settled around me with its familiar morning noises, the radiator clicking, the refrigerator motor engaging, the soft scrape of a branch against the eastern window. I turned the postcard over again. The real estate agency was called Harrington & Cole. I recognized the name. They specialized in estate properties, high-value downsizing, and discreet private sales. Discreet was a word that often meant someone did not want the neighbors asking questions. I searched the phone number online. It belonged to a realtor named Denise Harrington. Her profile photograph matched the woman on the postcard. Beneath it was a short biography describing her as a trusted transition specialist for families navigating inheritance, relocation, and senior living decisions. Senior living. I was 58. I clicked through the agency's website. My house did not appear among the public listings. That did not reassure me. A public listing leaves a trail. A private listing leaves only participants. At 9:20, I called Denise Harrington's office. A receptionist answered. Harrington & Cole Realty. How may I direct your call? I received a postcard regarding a private preview in Westridge. Of course. May I ask which property? That's what I'm trying to determine. She hesitated. Do you have the invitation code? I looked at the postcard again. Near the bottom, printed in gray so faintly I had missed it, was a 6-digit number. I read it aloud. There was the sound of typing. Then the receptionist's tone changed, not dramatically, but enough. May I have your name, sir? Why? To confirm authorization. Authorization for what? Another pause. I'll connect you with Miss Harrington. The line clicked, followed by soft piano music. I set the phone on speaker and opened the center drawer of the kitchen table. Inside was a yellow legal pad. At the top of a blank page, I wrote the date. Then, 7:15 a.m. Red ribbon on front gate. 7:18 a.m. Harrington & Cole postcard received. 8:30 a.m. Claire called. Requested access to financial paperwork. Claimed I had reported being behind. The piano music stopped. A woman came on the line. This is Denise Harrington. Her voice was smooth and careful. Mr. Mercer, she said, I believe there may have been a misunderstanding. I had not given the receptionist my name. I looked down at the legal pad, and for the first time that morning, I felt something colder than suspicion. I felt recognition. Someone had not merely discussed my house. Someone had begun a process. I kept my voice level. What kind of misunderstanding? Denise exhaled quietly. The kind best discussed with your daughter present. Outside, a gust of wind pushed the red maple leaves across the porch in a dry, whispering wave. I picked up my pen. Then let's not discuss it yet, I said. and I ended the call. At 5:58 that evening, Claire's headlights swept across the front windows. She had always been punctual when she wanted something. I was in the study, seated behind the walnut desk Margaret and I had bought at an estate auction 20 years earlier. The legal pad from that morning lay open beside my laptop. Under the notes about Denise Harrington, I had added 4 more entries. At 10:15, I called the town assessor's office. At 11:40, I reviewed the property records. At 1:10, I contacted an attorney I had known for 19 years. At 3:30, I found the photographer's footprints in the flower bed beneath the dining room window. The prints were narrow and deep at the heel, likely made by dress shoes. Whoever had photographed the house had stepped through the side garden, angled toward the front elevation, and stood close enough to capture the columns without the neighboring homes appearing in frame. That detail bothered me more than the postcard. A casual photograph can be explained. A composed photograph requires intention. I closed the legal pad when Claire's car door slammed. Through the study window, I watched her walk up the path carrying a large canvas bag and a blue ceramic pot wrapped in a dish towel. She wore a camel-colored coat, her hair pulled back neatly, her expression composed before she reached the door. Claire had learned presentation early. When she was 12, she broke a lamp in the living room and spent 20 minutes arranging the pieces before calling me in. She believed that if the damage looked orderly, it became less serious. I waited until she rang the bell. She had a key. The fact that she chose not to use it was deliberate. I opened the door. "There he is," she said with exaggerated warmth. "How was your day?" "Productive." "That sounds ominous." "Does it?" She smiled and lifted the pot. "Chicken soup. Low sodium. I don't have high blood pressure." "I know. It's preventive." She stepped inside before I invited her. Behind her came Daniel, her ex-husband. That was the first surprise she had brought me. Daniel stood on the porch with a grocery bag in each hand and an apologetic expression that looked practiced. He was 40, broad-shouldered, clean-shaven, and dressed in a navy quarter-zip sweater that seemed chosen to make him appear less formal than he was. He worked in commercial development. People in his profession used phrases like highest and best use when they meant tearing something down. "Hope you don't mind," Claire said. Daniel helped me carry everything. Daniel raised the bag slightly. "I can leave after I put these down." "You're already here," I said. That was not permission, but Claire treated it as such. "See?" she said. "I told you he'd be fine." I moved aside. Daniel entered and gave me a careful handshake. "Good to see you, Robert." "You too." It was a lie from both of us. Claire and Daniel had been divorced for 11 months. During that time, Claire had referred to him as selfish, manipulative, emotionally absent, and financially reckless. Daniel, for his part, had described Claire as controlling and impossible to satisfy. Yet there they were, carrying soup into my kitchen like a couple arriving for Sunday dinner. Reconciliation was possible. Shared interest was more likely. Claire began unloading containers while Daniel placed bread and fruit on the counter. "You didn't need to bring all this," I said. "That's what family does," Claire replied. Family is a word people often use when they want cooperation without negotiation. I sat at the table while she served the soup. Daniel declined a bowl, saying he had eaten earlier, though he stayed seated. Claire watched me take the first spoonful. "Well, it's soup." She laughed. "You could try being gracious. I said it was soup." "That's accurate." Daniel looked down, suppressing a smile. For 10 minutes, the conversation remained ordinary. Claire talked about a regional sales meeting. Daniel mentioned a commercial project near New Haven. I commented on the weather and asked whether they had seen the road construction near Route 44. No one mentioned the postcard. That told me they expected me to. When I did not, Claire's movements became slightly less fluid. She folded her napkin, unfolded it, and aligned the edge with the table. Finally, she said, "Did you get any unusual mail today?" I lifted my eyes. What would qualify as unusual? She glanced at Daniel. Anything related to the house? Daniel's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. I took another spoonful of soup. I received the electric bill. Dad. What? This is exactly what I mean. What do you mean? You make people drag things out of you. I wasn't aware you were trying to extract something. Her expression shifted. Not anger, concern. Claire had become very good at concern. I spoke with Denise, she said. I placed the spoon in the bowl. Who is Denise? The lie came easily, because it was small. Claire studied my face. Denise Harrington, the realtor. I let 3 seconds pass. What realtor? Daniel leaned forward. Robert, this doesn't have to become adversarial. I turned to him. I didn't know it was anything yet. He sat back. Claire's voice softened. We were trying to spare you stress. From what? From having to make difficult decisions alone. I wasn't aware I had a difficult decision. That's because you keep avoiding the conversation. What conversation? The future. She said it gently, almost sadly, as if the future had recently received a bad diagnosis. I looked from Claire to Daniel. They had rehearsed this. Not the exact words, perhaps, but the sequence. Concern first. Resistance reframed as confusion. Confusion reframed as decline. I knew the pattern because I had seen it in boardrooms. A proposal was introduced as inevitable. Questions were treated as emotional objections. Objections became evidence that the person asking them was unfit to decide. Claire reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. You shouldn't be managing this place by yourself. I've managed it for 32 years. You weren't alone for 32 years. The room went still. Margaret had been dead for 3 years, 4 months, and 9 days. Claire knew I counted. She withdrew her hand slowly. I didn't mean that cruelly. No, I said. You meant it usefully. Her eyes narrowed. Daniel intervened. The point is, the property has appreciated considerably. This could be a smart time to explore options. What options? A smaller place, he said. Something easier. Safer. Safer from what? Falls. Maintenance. Isolation. I'm 58. Age isn't the only consideration, Claire said. What are the others? She took a breath. Your judgment. There it was. Not the accusation itself, but the first visible edge of it. I kept my face neutral. Claire continued carefully. You've been forgetting things. Such as appointments, conversations, details. Give me an example. You forgot that we discussed the realtor. We didn't. We did, Dad. When? 2 weeks ago. In this kitchen, Daniel nodded. I was here. He had not been in my kitchen in 7 months. I knew because I had changed the alarm code the morning after his last visit. I looked at him. What day? He hesitated. A Saturday. Which Saturday? Claire squeezed her eyes shut for a moment. This is what I'm talking about. You turn everything into a cross-examination because you're uncomfortable. No, I said. I ask for dates because dates exist. She stood and carried her bowl to the sink. We are not your enemies. I didn't say you were. You don't have to. The suspicion is obvious. Daniel folded his hands on the table. No one has signed anything binding, he said. I turned toward him slowly. That sentence contained more information than he intended. No one has signed anything binding. Not. Nothing has happened. Not. The house isn't for sale. Not. We would never act without you. The wording was legalistic because Daniel understood contracts well enough to know where the danger began. I leaned back. All right, I said. Claire turned from the sink. All right, what? All right. I'll listen. Her shoulders lowered. The relief was immediate and revealing. Daniel opened one of the grocery bags and removed a gray folder I had not seen him put there. He placed it on the table between us. Claire returned to her chair. "We're not asking you to decide tonight," she said. "We just want you to understand what's possible." I looked at the folder. A white label had been affixed to the front. Mercer. Property. Transition. Plani felt no anger. Anger is expensive. It narrows vision and encourages speed. What I felt instead was clarity. They believed they were ahead of me. They believed I was seated at my own kitchen table, about to learn what they had already decided. I rested one hand on the folder. Then I gave them the expression they wanted. Tired. Uncertain. Almost grateful. "Walk me through it," I said. Claire smiled. Not broadly. Just enough. And as Daniel opened the folder, I understood that the most useful thing I could do was let them believe the performance was working. Daniel opened the folder as if he were presenting quarterly earnings. The first page was a glossy property summary. My house had been reduced to square footage, bedroom count, tax history, and development potential. The language was bloodless and efficient. 4-bedroom colonial, on oversized parcel. Strong resale opportunity, following cosmetic updates. Ideal candidate for expedited private sale. Below that was the photograph from the postcard. The image had been altered more heavily than I first realized. The shutters were darker. The lawn was greener. The cracked mortar near the chimney had been erased. Even the brass numbers beside the front door had been sharpened until they looked new. My home had been cleaned of every imperfection that proved someone actually lived there. Daniel watched me study the page. "The market analysis is conservative," he said. "Denise thinks there may be room above that range, depending on buyer interest." "What range?" He turned the page. A number had been printed in large type. It was substantial, higher than the assessed value, lower than the likely market value, and low enough to attract immediate attention from investors. A fast sale price. Not a fair sale price. I ran my finger along the bottom edge of the paper. "Who prepared this?" "Denise's team," Claire said. "Who gave them access to the property details?" "Most of that is public." "Most." Daniel shifted in his chair. "Some measurements came from the appraisal you had done when you refinanced." I looked at Claire. "That appraisal is in my study." She held my gaze. "You gave me a copy." "When?" "A few years ago." "For what purpose?" "I don't remember." "That seems inconvenient." Her mouth tightened. "Dad, can we not do this?" "Do what?" "Treat every imperfect memory like evidence of a crime." I nearly admired the sentence. It was designed to place my precision on trial while her vagueness remained protected. I turned another page. There was a proposed timeline. Week 1. Private previews. Week 2. Buyer selection. Week 3. Contract and inspection. Week 5. Closing. At the bottom, under Seller Objectives, someone had typed, "Minimize disruption and reduce decision fatigue." I read it twice. "Whose decision fatigue?" Claire folded her arms. "It's a general phrase. It's under Seller Objectives. It means they handle the details for you." "For me?" "Yes, without asking me what I want." "We know what you want." The words came out quickly. Too quickly. Daniel glanced at her. Claire noticed and corrected herself. "We know what you've said you want. Less upkeep. Fewer responsibilities. More freedom." "I've said I want fewer responsibilities?" "You complain about the house constantly." "I complain about the gutters." "The gutters are part of the house. So is the fireplace." "I like the fireplace." "This isn't about individual features." "No," I said. "I suppose it isn't." I turned the page again. The next document was titled Relocation Options. 3 properties were listed. The first was a condominium near Farmington, recently renovated and located close to a hospital. The second was a small townhouse in a gated development. The third was an independent living community called Willow Creek. I stopped there. The photograph showed a brick building with manicured hedges and a circular driveway. An elderly couple sat on a bench beside a pond, both smiling with the vacant serenity of people who had signed model releases. I looked at Claire. You're suggesting assisted living? It's independent living. At 58. It isn't about age. You've said that twice. Because you keep using age to avoid the actual issue. And the actual issue is support. I have support. You have routines. Her voice was calm, almost tender. Routines aren't the same as support, Dad. I leaned back and allowed my face to soften. Not too much. Sudden surrender would have made her suspicious. You think I'm not managing well? Claire's expression changed immediately. She leaned forward. I think you're managing too much. The distinction was polished enough to have been practiced. Daniel nodded. This isn't about taking control away from you. He placed one hand near the folder, palm down, like a man calming a nervous animal. It's about giving you choices while you can still make them comfortably. While you can still make them. I looked at him. He realized what he had said and tried to repair it. I mean, before there's a crisis, a fall, a medical event, something unexpected. Of course, the words seemed to reassure them. I let my shoulders drop slightly. Claire reached for my hand again. This time, I allowed her to take it. You don't have to be afraid, she said. I'm not afraid. Everyone is afraid of change. Then perhaps I'm everyone. She smiled with relief. It was remarkable how quickly concern became satisfaction once resistance disappeared. I closed the folder. What exactly has been done so far? Claire glanced at Daniel. He answered, preliminary market preparation. That phrase doesn't mean anything. Denise has identified several potential buyers. Have any of them seen the house? Only exterior materials. Has anyone been here? No, Claire said. The answer was immediate. Daniel's eyes moved toward her, then back to me. I remembered the footprints in the flower bed. Has anyone entered the property? Claire's thumb moved once across the back of my hand. No. The lie was gentle. That made it worse. I pulled my hand away, not abruptly, and opened the folder again. Near the back was a form-headed authorization to market property. It was unsigned. At least, the copy in front of me was. The seller's name had already been typed. Robert Mercer. The contact person beneath it was listed as Claire Mercer. Authorized family representative. There was no legal basis for that designation. No power of attorney, no conservatorship, no agency agreement. Just a phrase placed on paper in the hope that no one would ask what supported it. I tapped the line with one finger. What does authorized family representative mean? It means I help coordinate, Claire said. Authorized by whom? By you. When? She drew in a slow breath. We've discussed this. We've discussed many things. You said you trusted me to handle matters if necessary. That is not authorization. Legally. Maybe not yet. There it was again. Not yet. Daniel stepped in before she could say more. That's why nothing binding has been executed. I looked down at the form. May I keep this? The question seemed to surprise them. Claire recovered first. Of course. We made it for you. I nodded. And the rest of the folder? All yours, Daniel said. Thank you. I stacked the pages carefully and slid them back beneath the gray cover. Claire studied me. What are you thinking? I'm thinking you've both put a great deal of work into this. We have, she said. I can see that. And? I let the silence lengthen. Then I looked toward the darkened kitchen window, where our reflections floated over the glass. Claire sat beside me, composed and attentive. Daniel sat across from us, hands folded. From a distance, we might have looked like a family making a difficult decision together. Appearances often survive longer than truth. I need a little time, I said. Claire nodded quickly. Of course, but I don't want you to stop the process. Daniel's eyebrows lifted. Claire became very still. What do you mean? She asked. Continue gathering information. Speak with Denise. Identify the buyers. Relief moved through the room so quietly that neither of them seemed aware of it. You're open to selling? Claire asked. I'm open to understanding my options. That's all we wanted. I knew it wasn't, but I smiled faintly and closed the folder. Then we agree. They stayed another 20 minutes. Claire washed the bowls. Daniel carried the empty bags to the car. At the door, she hugged me longer than usual. You're doing the right thing, she whispered. I did not ask which thing she meant. After their taillights disappeared, I locked the door and returned to the kitchen. The soup pot remained on the stove. The house was quiet again. I carried the gray folder into the study, placed it under the desk lamp, and photographed every page. Then I called the attorney I had spoken with that afternoon. He answered on the second ring. Robert? They've given me the documents, I said. All of them. Enough. Do they know you called me? No. Good. I looked at the authorization form bearing my typed name. What did the title search show? He was silent for half a second. Then he said, Someone requested a certified copy of your deed 3 weeks ago. Who? The request was made through Harrington and Cole. I wrote it down. And there's something else, he continued. What? Yesterday, the county clerk received a filing inquiry about transferring the property into a family trust. My pen stopped. What family trust? That, he said, is what we need to find out. I stared at the closed study door. Beyond it, the house stood exactly as it had that morning. But the situation had changed. My daughter was no longer merely trying to sell my home. She was exploring how to move it beyond my reach. The following morning, I drove to New Haven to meet my attorney. His name was Samuel Roth, though everyone called him Sam. He had spent 36 years practicing estate law and had the temperament of a man who distrusted both urgency and optimism. His office occupied the second floor of a narrow brick building above a watch repair shop. Nothing inside had been renovated since the late 90s. The carpet was gray, the filing cabinets were beige, and the receptionist still used a desk calendar large enough to land a small plane on. I trusted the place immediately, the first time I saw it. Modern offices are designed to suggest certainty. Sam's office suggested records. He was waiting for me in the conference room with 2 cups of coffee and a yellow folder marked with my name. You look rested, he said. I'm not. That usually means you're thinking clearly. I sat across from him. Sam was 67. Thin, silver-haired, and incapable of pretending bad news was good news. It was one of the reasons we had remained friends. He opened the folder. Let's separate what we know from what we suspect. That would be useful. He placed 3 documents on the table. The first was a copy of my deed. The second was a record of the certified copy request submitted by Harrington and Cole. The third was an internal inquiry form, obtained through a clerk Sam had known for years. He tapped the 3rd page. This is the problem. I read it carefully. The form requested information regarding the transfer of my property into an irrevocable family trust. The proposed trust name was listed as the Mercer Family Preservation Trust. Preservation. People choose reassuring names for dangerous instruments. The inquiry asked about recording fees, transfer taxes, and whether a beneficiary with diminished decision-making capacity could remain in residence after ownership changed. I read that sentence twice. Diminished capacity. Sam nodded. It isn't a filing. Not yet. Who submitted the inquiry? An associate at Daniel's development firm. I looked up. Sam leaned back. Daniel may claim it was preliminary research. Of course he will. And legally, preliminary research is not wrongdoing. Neither is buying rope. That depends on what you do with it. I set the page down. What would they need to transfer the property without my informed consent? A valid power of attorney, a court-appointed conservatorship, or your signature obtained under circumstances they could defend. I haven't signed anything. Not knowingly. I looked at him. Sam held my gaze. Do you remember signing documents for Claire in the last year? Tax forms related to her divorce. A loan guarantee that I ultimately refused. 2 healthcare authorization forms after her car accident. Did you review every page? Yes. Every attachment? I paused. Sam noticed. Robert. She brought the healthcare forms to the hospital. There were several pages. How many did you sign? 3. Did you retain copies? No. The admission irritated me more than it should have. I had spent a career warning clients that trust was not a substitute for documentation, yet grief changes the scale of what feels dangerous. After Margaret died, I had treated family requests as interruptions, not exposures. Sam folded his hands. I'm not saying you signed a power of attorney. I'm saying we verify. How? We obtain every document associated with Claire's medical incident, then compare signatures. We also send written notice to the realtor that no one has authority to act on your behalf. No. His eyebrows lifted. No. Not yet. He studied me for several seconds. You want them to continue? I want to know how far they've gone. That carries risk. So does warning them. Sam rubbed his thumb along the edge of the folder. You're assuming they'll reveal more if they believe you're compliant. I'm not assuming. They already have. I told him about the dinner, the gray folder, the staged conversation, and Daniel's repeated insistence that nothing binding had been signed. Sam listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, they're building a narrative. Yes. That you're forgetful. Yes. That the house is becoming unmanageable. Yes. That Claire has been acting with your verbal approval. Yes. He looked toward the window. And they have a realtor willing to participate. Perhaps. You think Denise may not know. I think competent people are capable of believing whatever allows them to invoice. Sam almost smiled. Fair. I opened my own briefcase and removed the legal pad. Claire has used the phrases, not quite yourself, decision fatigue, and before there's a crisis within the last 6 weeks. Daniel said I should make choices while I still can. You documented all of that? With dates. Any witnesses? Not to the earlier conversations. Recordings? Not yet. Sam's expression hardened slightly. Connecticut is a one-party consent state for in-person conversations under many circumstances, but we need to be precise about context. Do not improvise. I wasn't planning to. Good. Improvisation is how intelligent people become exhibits. He turned the inquiry form toward me. What do you want? The question was broader than it sounded. I looked down at the proposed trust name. I want proof. Of intent? Of method. Sam nodded slowly. That distinction matters. It always does. We spent the next hour constructing boundaries. Sam would quietly confirm whether any power of attorney bearing my name existed. He would review the documents from Claire's hospital visit. He would place a private monitoring alert on the property record so that any attempted filing triggered immediate notice. He would not contact Claire, Daniel, Denise, or the development firm. Not yet. Before I left, he handed me a small digital recorder still sealed in its package. For consultations, he said. I have a phone. Phones announce themselves. This doesn't. I thought you said not to improvise. I said be precise. I put the recorder in my briefcase. At the door, Sam stopped me. One more thing. What? You're approaching this like a commercial dispute. It is a property matter. No. It stopped being only that when your daughter began laying the foundation to question your competence. I said nothing. His voice softened. If they fail to take the house, they may still damage your reputation. Once people begin hearing that a man is confused, every disagreement becomes evidence. I knew he was right. A financial allegation can be disproved with records. An allegation of decline is more elegant. It turns your defense into part of the accusation. The harder you insist you are rational, the more agitated you appear. The more details you provide, the more obsessive you seem. The more calmly you resist, the more they say you are hiding fear. It is a trap built from interpretation rather than fact. I'll be careful, I said. Sam nodded, though he did not look reassured. When I returned home shortly after noon, a silver SUV was parked across the street. The engine was running. A woman sat behind the wheel, holding a phone at chest level. As I pulled into my driveway, she lowered it. I parked in the garage and entered through the side door. From the kitchen window, I watched the SUV remain in place for another 4 minutes. Then it drove away. I wrote down the license plate. At 2:17, Claire sent me a text. How are you feeling today? I looked at the message without answering. 3 minutes later, another appeared. Denise has a very serious buyer who may want to see the house tomorrow. No pressure. Just a quick look. I told her you'd probably be comfortable with that. I read the words carefully. Not. Would you agree? Not. May I arrange it? She had already provided my probable consent to a stranger. I typed a response. That should be fine. What time? Claire replied within seconds. I'm proud of you, Dad. 11 a.m. I'll be there early so you don't have to manage anything. I set the phone down. Outside, the wind moved through the bare branches of the maple tree, making them scrape lightly against one another. Tomorrow, they would bring a buyer into my home, and for the first time, I would see exactly what story they had been telling about me. At 10:43 the next morning, Claire arrived carrying a white bakery box and a vase of yellow tulips. The flowers were not for me. They were for the house. She placed them on the dining room table, moved them twice, then stepped back to judge the effect. Too much? She asked. For what? Just trying to make the room feel warm. It has heat. She gave me the patient smile people reserve for men they have already classified as difficult. You know what I mean. I did. She had opened the curtains before asking permission. She had also removed Margaret's blue cardigan from the back of the reading chair and folded it into a drawer. The cardigan had been there for 3 years. I rarely touched it. That did not mean it was abandoned. Claire smoothed the tablecloth and glanced toward the kitchen. You should sit down before they get here. I am capable of standing. I know, I just don't want you getting tired. Tired from what? Meeting people can be draining. I looked at her. She did not look away. The performance had become more precise. Today, she was not merely helping me. She was preparing witnesses. I went into the study and checked the recorder Sam had given me. It was clipped inside the breast pocket of my shirt, beneath a wool cardigan. The red indicator light was hidden by the fabric. At 10:56, a black Mercedes pulled into the driveway. Denise Harrington stepped out first. She wore the same cream-colored blazer from the postcard, though the effect in person was sharper. Her hair was silver blonde, her posture upright, her expression attentive without being familiar. The man who emerged from the passenger side was perhaps 65, tall and narrow, with a folded raincoat over one arm. He paused before closing the door and looked at the house for a long moment, not admiringly. Assessing. Claire opened the front door before they rang. Denise, she said warmly. They embraced. That told me more than a handshake would have. Denise entered, and looked directly at me. "Mr. Mercer, thank you for allowing us to visit." Her tone was professional, but her eyes searched my face. "For allowing you," I said. Claire touched my elbow. "Dad." Only one word, lightly spoken. A correction disguised as affection. Denise's gaze moved to Claire's hand, then back to me. The buyer extended his own, Thomas Bell. "Robert Mercer." His handshake was firm. "I appreciate your time," he said. "That depends on how much of it you use." Thomas smiled. "Not broadly. I'll try to be efficient." Claire laughed too quickly. "Dad has a dry sense of humor." "I understood him," Thomas said. "That was the first thing I liked about him." We began in the living room. Denise led the tour, as if she had been in the house before. She knew the dimensions, the age of the windows, the location of the electrical upgrades, and the fact that the fireplace had been relined 7 years earlier. Public records did not contain that. The appraisal did. So did the maintenance binder in my study. She stopped near the bay window. "The natural light is one of the strongest features," she said, "and the floor plan offers flexibility if the next owner wants to open the wall between the living and dining rooms." Thomas ran his fingertips along the wood trim. "Original?" "Yes," I said. Denise answered at the same time. "Mostly." We looked at each other. "What was replaced?" I asked. She hesitated. "I'd need to confirm." "I wouldn't." Claire stepped closer. "Dad renovated parts of the room years ago. He sometimes forgets which details were original." The sentence entered the room softly. Thomas looked at me. I gave him no reaction. Denise continued the tour. In the kitchen, Claire explained that the cabinets were functional, but dated. In the hallway, she said the upstairs layout might be more space than one person realistically needs. Near the basement door, she mentioned that I no longer liked using the stairs. "I use them every morning," I said. She smiled. "When you remember to turn the light on." Thomas said nothing. That was important. Most buyers fill awkward moments with politeness. Thomas seemed content to collect them. We went upstairs. Claire moved ahead of me, one hand hovering near my back without touching it. A gesture of assistance. A visual statement. At the top landing, Denise opened the door to the primary bedroom. Margaret's room. Our room. The bed was made. Her cedar jewelry box remained on the dresser. A framed photograph from our 25th anniversary stood beside the lamp. Claire picked it up before Thomas entered. She turned it face down. "Personal items can distract buyers," she said. I looked at the back of the frame. My face remained calm. Inside, something shifted. Not anger. A boundary. There are acts that are offensive because they are cruel. Others are offensive because of how ordinary the person committing them believes they are. Claire had turned my marriage face down to improve a showing. Thomas looked at the frame. Then at me. "You built the window seat?" he asked. "Yes." "It's well done." "Thank you." Claire opened the closet. "There's more storage than Dad uses now." Thomas did not look inside. Instead, he crossed to the window and studied the backyard. "What happens to the maple tree?" he asked. Denise blinked. "The maple?" "If I buy the property." She recovered. "Of course, that would be your decision." Thomas looked at me. "How old is it?" "About 70 years. You know that? I have the original landscaping plan." Claire laughed softly. "He keeps everything." "Records are useful," Thomas said. "Yes," I replied. "They prevent confusion." For the first time that morning, Claire's expression tightened, only for a second. Then it was gone. We returned downstairs and gathered in the dining room. Denise placed a slim folder on the table. Thomas remained standing. "I'd like to ask Mr. Mercer a few questions privately," he said. Claire's smile froze. Of course, I can answer anything about the transition. I'm sure you can. His tone was courteous. That's why I'd prefer to speak with the owner. Denise stepped in. Thomas, we generally coordinate through Claire to reduce stress. For whom? No one answered. Thomas looked at me. Would you be comfortable speaking alone? Claire turned toward me. Dad, you don't need to do that. The recorder inside my pocket captured the tenderness in her voice. I lowered my eyes, as though considering something difficult. Then I gave her exactly the uncertainty she expected. I think I can manage a few questions. Her jaw moved slightly. Of course you can, she said. But the warmth had left her voice. Denise and Claire went into the kitchen. The door remained open by several inches. Thomas sat across from me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he placed his folded raincoat on the empty chair beside him. Are you selling this house voluntarily? He asked. His voice was quiet, direct. I looked toward the kitchen doorway. Claire's shadow moved across the floor. What have you been told? I asked. Thomas kept his eyes on me. That your daughter is coordinating the sale because your memory has become unreliable. There it was, plainly stated. Not implied over soup. Not wrapped in concern. I folded my hands on the table. And do I appear unreliable to you? No, that may disappoint them. It already has. I studied him more carefully. Why are you here, Mr. Bell? He leaned back. Because Daniel offered me this property at a price low enough to make me suspicious. What does Daniel expect from you? A fast closing. No financing. Minimal inspection. And afterward? Thomas looked toward the wall separating the dining room from the kitchen. He wants an option to repurchase the property through one of his companies within 18 months. The room seemed to narrow. Not because I was surprised, because the structure had finally become visible. A private sale to a cooperative buyer, a transfer away from me. Then a quiet acquisition by Daniel. Did you agree? I asked. No. Why not? Because men who create complicated arrangements around simple assets are usually hiding the simplest motive. And what motive is that? Profit. I glanced at the yellow tulips Claire had arranged between us. Profit is rarely the only motive. Thomas nodded. No. Sometimes it's also punishment. From the kitchen, I heard Claire laugh at something Denise said. Thomas lowered his voice. I haven't signed anything. Good. But Daniel believes I'm interested. Better. He watched me for a moment. You knew about this. Not all of it. What are you going to do? I looked around the dining room, at the trim Margaret had chosen, at the table where Claire had done her homework as a child, at the flowers she had brought to make Betrayal look cheerful. I'm going to sell the house, I said. Thomas frowned. To Daniel? No. To whom? I looked directly at him. That depends. On what? Whether you're willing to buy it for $1. The silence that followed was not confusion. It was recognition. Thomas Bell understood, before I explained a single detail, that I was not surrendering the property. I was removing it from the game. Thomas did not react immediately. That told me he was the right kind of man to ask. Most people respond to an unusual proposal by filling the silence with disbelief. Thomas simply studied me, as though turning the sentence around and inspecting it from several angles. $1, he said at last. $1. For the house. For legal title to the house. His eyes narrowed slightly. And what would I actually be buying? A problem. That part is obvious. A temporary one, if everything is done correctly. From the kitchen came the soft clink of porcelain. Claire was speaking in a low voice, too quiet to understand. Denise answered with the gentle rhythm of reassurance. Thomas leaned forward. Why me? Because Daniel chose you. That seems like a reason not to trust me. It is. He almost smiled. Then we're making progress. I kept my hands folded on the table. You said Daniel wants an option to repurchase the property through one of his companies. Yes. Do you have that in writing? Not exactly. What do you have? Emails referring to a secondary acquisition arrangement, a draft consulting agreement, a projected payment schedule. To you? To an LLC I control. What would you receive? A fee at closing, another when the option was exercised, and a percentage if the property was redeveloped. And you haven't accepted? No. Why? Thomas looked toward the kitchen. Daniel thinks everyone has a price. Most people do. He assumes that means he knows the number. I understood that kind of pride. Daniel had never been careless about figures. He was careless about people. He believed motives could be calculated because his own were usually financial. What would you require from me? Thomas asked. A confidential agreement. A legitimate purchase contract. Independent legal representation. A lease allowing me to remain in the house. And a recorded restriction preventing transfer or encumbrance without my written consent. He stared at me. That sounds less like a sale than a barricade. It is both. If title passes to me, your daughter may claim undue influence. She may. She may claim you lacked capacity. She is already preparing to. She is already preparing to. She may sue. She almost certainly will. Thomas leaned back. And you still want to do this? I want Daniel's structure to collapse before he can complete it. Why not simply confront them? Because confrontation would teach them what I know, and selling to me would not? Not until it is too late. He considered that. Then he asked the question I expected. What happens after? After what? After they fail. I looked at the photograph Claire had turned face down upstairs, though I could not see it from where I sat. Then, I decide whether the house should ever be mine again. That answer seemed to unsettle him more than anything else I had said. You'd risk losing it. No. You would be transferring ownership. I understand the distinction between risk and certainty. If I became dishonest, then I would lose the house. If I died, your estate could become involved. If I filed bankruptcy, a trustee might challenge the arrangement. You've thought through the weaknesses. I've spent my life looking for weaknesses. Then why proceed? I listened to Claire laugh again from the kitchen, because some assets become dangerous when everyone knows how much you value them. Because possession can become leverage. Because my daughter had begun confusing inheritance with entitlement. I answered more simply. Because right now, they believe the house is the center of my decision-making. I need them to discover it isn't. Thomas's gaze held mine. This is not about protecting the property. Not entirely. It's about removing their power over you. Yes. Before he could respond, Claire entered the dining room. Her smile was composed, but her eyes moved immediately from Thomas to me. Everything okay? Mr. Bell had questions, I said. I hope Dad didn't overwhelm you with details. Thomas stood. He was very clear. Her smile thinned. That's good. Denise appeared behind her. Thomas, would you like to see the basement before we wrap up? No need. You're satisfied with the condition? I've seen enough. Claire touched the back of a chair. And your interest level? Thomas looked at me before answering. High. The relief on her face was immediate. Denise stepped closer. Would you be prepared to discuss terms? Yes. Wonderful. Claire has authority to coordinate the next steps. Thomas glanced at Claire. Then he said, I'd prefer all documents to be reviewed by Mr. Mercer directly. The room became still. Claire recovered first. Of course. I only help him organize. I'm sure. Thomas picked up his raincoat. I'll have my attorney contact the appropriate parties. Denise nodded. We can provide the standard forms. That won't be necessary. Her expression changed, only slightly, but enough to confirm that standard forms were part of their control. Thomas shook my hand. Thank you for your time, Mr. Mercer. Thank you for using it carefully. Claire escorted them to the door. I remained in the dining room. Through the front window, I saw Denise speak to Thomas beside the Mercedes. She leaned toward him with both hands clasped in front of her. He listened, nodded once, and entered the car. Denise stayed in the driveway for several seconds after he closed the door. She was worried. That was useful. Claire returned, wearing an expression of restrained excitement. Well, she said, that went better than expected. For whom? For everyone. She began collecting the coffee cups. Thomas is exactly the kind of buyer we need. Cash, flexible timing, no emotional attachment. No emotional attachment, I repeated. You know what I mean. I usually do. She placed the cups on a tray. Denise thinks we could have a letter of intent within 48 hours. That's fast. That's good. Speed is not always good. She exhaled. Please don't start retreating now. I'm not retreating. You do this. You agree. Then you find technical reasons to delay. What technical reasons? Documents, wording, procedures. Those are often what agreements consist of. She set the tray down harder than necessary. You said you trusted me. I said I would listen. That is not what I remember. There it was again. Memory used as a weapon that required no evidence. I lowered my voice. Then perhaps we should write things down from now on. Claire stared at me. For the first time since this began, she looked uncertain. Not frightened. Not yet. But the certainty had cracked. She recovered by smoothing the sleeve of her coat. That might be best, she said. I agree. She left 10 minutes later. As soon as her car disappeared, I called Sam. He answered with, Tell me you didn't sign anything. I found the buyer. Robert. He knows about Daniel's repurchase plan. Silence. Then Sam said, Come to my office. I need you to prepare a sale. To whom? Thomas Bell. For how much? $1. Sam did not speak for several seconds. When he did, his voice was quieter. You understand that a nominal sale between unrelated parties will be scrutinized. Yes. The town may assess taxes based on fair market value. I know. Creditors, heirs, and family members may challenge it. I know. You will need an independent appraisal, capacity evaluation, disclosure, leaseback, indemnities, and a documented non-financial purpose. I've already begun listing them. Of course you have. I looked around the dining room. The tulips stood in the center of the table, bright and artificial against the gray afternoon. Can it be done legally? I asked. Sam sighed. Yes. Can it be done quickly? Yes. Can it be done without Claire finding out? Until recording, probably. Then prepare it. Robert, once title transfers, this becomes real. It is already real. No, right now they are attempting to take your house. After the sale, you will have voluntarily given it away. I looked toward the front gate. The red ribbon was no longer there, but I could still see exactly where it had been tied. Not given away, I said, moved. To a stranger. Yes, for $1. Yes. Sam was quiet again. Then he asked, Why $1? Because when Claire sees the deed, I want her to understand something. What? That she misjudged the asset. I paused. And the owner. Sam arranged the sale with the kind of caution usually reserved for unexploded devices. Nothing moved quickly in appearance, though every necessary step was completed within 6 days. First came the appraisal. A licensed appraiser from Bridgeport spent nearly 3 hours measuring rooms, photographing mechanical systems, examining the roofline, and asking questions about renovations. He was not told about Claire, Daniel, or the private listing. He was told only that the property was being transferred through an unconventional estate planning arrangement and that an independent market value was required. His final figure was higher than Denise's proposed sale range by nearly 18%. That confirmed what I had already suspected. They were not simply trying to sell the house. They were trying to sell it cheaply enough that Daniel could profit from reacquiring it. Next came the medical evaluation. Sam referred me to a neurologist who specialized in capacity assessments for legal proceedings. Her name was Dr. Anita Shah, and she had the unnerving ability to ask simple questions in a way that made careless answers impossible. We met in a quiet office overlooking a hospital parking structure. She tested memory, reasoning, numerical comprehension, language, and judgment. She asked me to explain the difference between transferring title and granting a security interest. She gave me hypothetical financial decisions and changed one fact each time to see whether I adjusted my conclusion. Near the end, she placed her pen down. "Mr. Mercer, do you understand why this evaluation was requested?" "Yes." "Explain it in your own words." "My daughter and her former husband may challenge a property transfer by claiming I lack sufficient capacity to understand it. Do you believe you lack capacity?" "No." "People with impaired judgment often believe they are functioning normally." "I'm aware." "Then why should I trust your assessment of yourself?" "You shouldn't." She raised one eyebrow. "You should trust your testing, your observations, and the consistency between my stated objectives and the legal structure I have chosen." For the first time, she smiled. Good answer. Her written conclusion was unambiguous. I demonstrated full decisional capacity. I understood the value of the house, the consequences of the transaction, the risks of transferring title, the identities and interests of the parties involved, and the available alternatives. Sam read the report twice. "This will not prevent a lawsuit," he said. "No document prevents a lawsuit. It will make one less attractive. That is usually enough." Thomas retained his own attorney, a woman named Evelyn Price, who had spent most of her career representing trustees and receivers. She reviewed the arrangement without sentiment. "This is legally possible," she said during our first meeting, "but the structure must reflect reality. If Mr. Bell is merely holding title as your nominee, a court may disregard the sale. He will be the legal owner," I said. "With meaningful rights?" "Yes." "Can he sell?" "Only subject to the recorded restriction." "Can he borrow against the property?" "Not without my written consent." "Can he collect rent?" "Under the lease, yes." Thomas looked at me. "We hadn't discussed rent." "We are now." Evelyn nodded. "Good. Symbolic arrangements attract suspicion. Real obligations create credibility." The lease was for 5 years, renewable at my option for another 5. The monthly rent was modest but legitimate. I remained responsible for utilities and ordinary maintenance. Thomas became responsible for property taxes, structural repairs, and insurance as the titled owner. I prepaid the first year into escrow. The deed reflected consideration of $1 and other valuable consideration. The other valuable consideration was not hidden. It included the leaseback, assumption of specific ownership obligations, preservation covenants, and Thomas's agreement to cooperate in any investigation concerning Daniel's proposed repurchase structure. The $1 remained because I wanted it there. Not for theatrical reasons. Not entirely. A deed is both an instrument and a message. People focus on the number because numbers appear objective. $1 would force Claire to confront the fact that I had valued control differently than she did. On the 5th day, Sam called me shortly before noon. "We have a problem." I was in the kitchen replacing a loose hinge on a cabinet door. "What kind?" "Claire contacted Dr. Milton Graves." The name was familiar. He had been Margaret's primary care physician and remained technically listed as mine, though I had not seen him in more than a year. For what purpose? She reported concerns about your memory and decision-making. I set the screwdriver down. Did he speak with her? Yes. Did he disclose anything? Not that we know, but his office created a note documenting the call. What did she say? Sam read from his notes. That you have become suspicious, increasingly isolated, resistant to assistance, preoccupied with paperwork, and confused about recent conversations. I almost laughed. Each item was true in a form distorted just enough to become useful. I was suspicious because they were lying. I was isolated because I lived alone. I resisted assistance because the assistance involved taking my property. I was preoccupied with paperwork because paperwork was how they intended to do it. And I disputed recent conversations because those conversations had never occurred. She's moving faster, I said. She may know something. How? Denise could be nervous. Thomas asked questions. Daniel may have realized he disclosed too much. Has anything been filed? No. Then we continue. Sam's voice sharpened. Robert, listen to me. Claire may seek an emergency conservatorship. On what evidence? Her testimony. Daniel's testimony. The realtor's observations. A doctor's note showing reported concerns. That isn't enough. For a permanent order? Probably not. For temporary relief, under the right presentation, it can create delay and confusion. Delay was their remaining advantage. If they could freeze my ability to transfer the house before recording, they could force the matter into court. Once there, the issue would no longer be ownership alone. It would become my mind. When is the deed scheduled to record? I asked. Tomorrow morning. Move it to today. The final signatures are at 4. Then record electronically at 4:15. Evelyn may object to rushing. Tell her the circumstances changed. Sam was silent. Then he said, There's another issue. What? Claire left you a voicemail. I checked my phone. There were 2 missed calls and 1 message. I put it on speaker. Claire's voice filled the kitchen, warm and measured. Dad, I'm worried about you. Denise said you behaved strangely during the showing, and Daniel told me you've been making unusual calls. I think we should pause everything until you've spoken with Dr. Graves. This isn't a punishment. I love you, and I need to know you're safe. Please don't sign anything. The message ended. I stood beside the open cabinet, listening to the refrigerator hum. She had chosen every word, carefully. Not accusation. Protection. Not control. Safety. Not obedience. Love. I replayed the message once and saved a copy. Then I called her. She answered immediately. Dad? I got your message. I'm glad. You want me to pause the sale. I want you to pause everything. Until I see Dr. Graves. Just to be safe. I looked at the clock. 3 hours until signing. All right, I said quietly. Her relief came through the phone like an exhale. Thank you. I understand why you're concerned. I knew you would. I won't sign anything. There was a brief silence. Then Claire said, I'm proud of you. We ended the call. I picked up the screwdriver, tightened the final hinge, and closed the cabinet door. At 4 o'clock, I signed the deed. The deed was recorded at 4:23 that afternoon. Sam called me at 4:26. It's done, he said. I was still seated in Evelyn Price's conference room with Thomas across from me and a stack of signed documents between us. Outside the windows, rain moved across downtown New Haven in thin diagonal lines. The glass reflected the 3 of us back into the room. Sam standing near the speakerphone, Evelyn reviewing the closing checklist, Thomas turning the original lease over in his hands. Nothing about the moment looked dramatic. No raised voices. No slammed doors. No triumphant music. Property changes hands quietly. A signature. A timestamp. A clerk entering information into a system. That is how entire lives are moved from one column to another. Evelyn looked up. Confirmation number? Sam read it aloud. She wrote it at the top of the closing memorandum and underlined it once. Then title has transferred. Thomas placed the lease on the table. The phrase carried weight even though everyone in the room already understood it. Title has transferred. The house I had bought at 26, repaired at 30, refinanced at 41, and paid off at 53, now legally belonged to a man I had met less than a week earlier. I waited for regret. It did not come. What came instead was a strange release, almost physical. A pressure I had not recognized until it disappeared. Claire could no longer force me to sell the house because it was no longer mine to sell. Daniel could no longer position himself to reacquire it from me because I was no longer in the chain of ownership. They had built their plan around my attachment. I had removed the attachment from their calculations. Thomas studied me. You all right? Yes. You don't look relieved. Relief is not always visible. Evelyn closed the file. From this moment forward, appearances matter. The rent must be paid on schedule. Ownership expenses must be handled exactly as documented. No informal side arrangements. I understand. She looked at Thomas. And you need to act like an owner, not a custodian. I understand. If either of you treats this as pretend, a judge may do the same. Sam sat beside me. The capacity report, appraisal, disclosures, and transaction memorandum are all preserved in separate files. We also have the recording from the showing and copies of the communications concerning Daniel's repurchase proposal. Thomas nodded. I'll forward the remaining emails tonight. Evelyn slid a small envelope across the table. Inside was a photocopy of the $1 bill Thomas had handed me as stated consideration. He had signed and dated the back. The original remained clipped to the transaction ledger. A ridiculous object, perhaps. But contracts often depend on small things being handled seriously. I placed the envelope in my briefcase. My phone vibrated. Claire. The timing was too precise to be coincidence. I let it ring once more before answering. Hello. Dad. Where are you? Her voice was controlled, but the control had edges. In New Haven. Why? I had an appointment. End of Lee's Leif is Leif. ADZ. End of Leif. 1. Dad. Where are you? With whom? That's a broad question. Dad, please. I looked across the table at Sam. He shook his head once. Not yet. I met with some advisors, I said. What advisors? Legal and financial. There was a silence. Then Claire spoke more slowly. You told me you wouldn't sign anything. I did. And did you? Yes. The line went quiet. The rain tapped against the window. What did you sign? She asked. A number of documents. Her breath changed. Barely. But I heard it. What documents? I'll explain tomorrow. No. Explain now. I'm not going to discuss legal matters over the phone. You always discuss legal matters over the phone. Not these. Dad, I need you to tell me exactly what happened. There was no concern in her voice now. Only command. The mask had not fallen completely, but it had slipped. You said you wanted things written down, I reminded her. This is not the time to be clever. I'm not being clever. You are confused. The words came harder than usual. Not wrapped in kindness. Not softened by worry. A direct accusation, at last. I kept my voice even. I know exactly what I signed. You told me you were going to pause. I changed my mind. That is not normal behavior. It is when new information becomes available. What information? I'll explain tomorrow. Dad, listen to me. Do not leave that office. Do not sign anything else. I'm coming there. The meeting is over. Then send me your location. No. Another silence. Longer this time. When she spoke again, the tenderness had returned. But now I could hear the machinery behind it. I'm scared for you. I understand. You clearly don't. I understand that you're scared. Then help me. I will. Tomorrow. She lowered her voice. If you've made a mistake, we can fix it. That sentence interested me. Not. If someone took advantage of you. Not. If you were pressured. If you've made a mistake. Claire was already thinking in terms of reversal. What kind of mistake? I asked. I don't know because you won't tell me. Then there's nothing to fix yet. You're doing that thing again. What thing? Turning everything into a technical argument. Technical arguments are useful when people are discussing legal rights. She exhaled sharply. Was Thomas involved? I said nothing. That silence answered more than I intended. Claire's voice changed. What did he make you sign? He didn't make me do anything. Of course he did. He saw that you were vulnerable. Did he? Denise warned me he was asking inappropriate questions. What made them inappropriate? He went around me. There it was. Not around the realtor. Not around the process. Around her. Claire believed she was the central authority because everyone had behaved as though she were. Tomorrow, I said. Dad, I'll be home at 10. Then I ended the call. Thomas looked at me. She knows. She knows something happened. That may be enough. It will have to be. Sam gathered the remaining papers. Expect a conservatorship filing. How quickly? Possibly tonight. If she has counsel prepared. Evelyn stood. The transfer is already recorded. A later filing will not undo that automatically. No, Sam said. But it can become part of the attack. Thomas put on his coat. What do you need from me? Nothing tonight, I said. Tomorrow. Come to the house at 10:30. Sam looked at me sharply. You're planning to meet them there? Yes. Who is them? Claire, Daniel, Denise, if Claire brings her. And you expect them to sit quietly while you explain they lost the property? I don't expect them to sit quietly. What do you expect? I closed my briefcase. I expect Claire to try to prove that I don't understand what I've done. And then? Then I'll show her that I understood every step before she took hers. The rain had slowed by the time I reached home. Claire's car was parked in my driveway. Daniel's was behind it. Both of them were standing on the porch beneath the yellow light, waiting. Claire held a folder against her chest. Daniel held nothing. That made him more dangerous. I remained in my car for several seconds, watching them through the windshield. Claire stepped down from the porch. Her face carried the exact expression she had used all along. Concern, love, fear. But now, anger showed beneath it, like a dark stain under thin paint. I took the $1 envelope from my briefcase and slipped it into my coat pocket. Then I got out of the car. Claire reached me before I had closed the car door. Give me your keys. Her voice was low, controlled, almost private. Daniel remained on the porch, watching. I slipped the keys into my coat pocket. No. She glanced toward the neighboring houses. Dad, please don't make a scene. I just arrived. You shouldn't be driving. Why? You're upset. I'm not. You clearly are. She placed one hand lightly on my forearm. The gesture would have looked affectionate from a distance. Up close, it was a restraint. Come inside, she said. We need to talk. I looked at her hand until she removed it. Then I walked past her. Daniel opened the front door for me as if the house were already under new management. We're trying to help, Robert. I've heard. Inside, the living room lamps were on. Claire had lit the fireplace, though the evening was not cold enough to require it. On the coffee table lay a legal pad, a box of tissues, and 3 glasses of water. The arrangement was deliberate. A difficult family conversation, a distressed father, concerned relatives, evidence, if necessary. I took off my coat, but kept it over my arm. The envelope containing the $1 copy remained in the inside pocket. Claire closed the door. "Sit down," she said. "I prefer to stand." Daniel stepped into the room. "We spoke with an attorney." "That was sensible." "We also spoke with Dr. Graves," Claire said. "Without me." "We had to." "No. You chose to." Her expression tightened. "Doctor, Graves agrees that your behavior is concerning. He hasn't examined me. He knows your history. My history is high cholesterol and a repaired knee. This isn't funny." I didn't laugh. Daniel moved closer to the mantel. "What exactly did you sign today?" I looked at him. "You first." His face remained still. "What do you mean?" "Tell me about the Mercer Family Preservation Trust." The room changed. Not visibly at first. The fire continued to crackle. Rainwater still moved down the front windows in narrow streams. Claire remained beside the sofa, with one hand resting on the back cushion, but both of them stopped performing for half a second. It was enough. Claire recovered first. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Daniel does." He folded his arms. "It was one possible estate planning vehicle, prepared by an associate at your firm. Researched," he corrected. "Not prepared. For a beneficiary with diminished decision-making capacity." Claire looked at him. That was useful. She had not known the exact wording. Daniel's eyes remained on me. "You've been going through private communications." "Private communications about my property. We were exploring ways to protect you. By transferring my house into an irrevocable trust? No transfer could occur without valid authority." "That sounds familiar." Claire stepped forward. "What did Thomas tell you?" I turned to her. "Enough." "He manipulated you." "No." "He knew you were confused." "Did he?" "He told Denise you were behaving irrationally." "That isn't true." "You don't know what's true anymore." The sentence came out cleanly. No hesitation, no softness. For weeks, she had approached the accusation indirectly, dressing it in concern. Now, the legal groundwork was close enough that she no longer needed subtlety. I placed my coat over the back of a chair. "Tomorrow morning," I said. "Thomas Bell will be here at 10:30. Sam Roth will arrive at 10:15. You and Daniel should return at 10. Claire stared at me. "Why?" "Because we are going to review the transaction." "What transaction?" "The one I completed today." Her face lost color. Daniel lowered his arms. "What did you sell?" I held his gaze. "The house." Claire gave a small laugh. It was involuntary and almost soundless. "No, you didn't." "I did." "To Thomas?" "Yes." "For how much?" I reached into my coat and removed the envelope. I did not hand it to her. I placed it on the coffee table between the glasses of water. Claire looked down at it. "What is that?" "Consideration." Daniel moved first. He picked up the envelope, opened it, and removed the photocopy of the signed $1 bill. His eyes moved quickly over the date and Thomas's signature. Then he looked at me. "This is a joke." "No, you transferred a property worth over $1 million for $1? "Yes." Claire snatched the paper from his hand. Her fingers trembled. Not dramatically, just enough to make the thin sheet flutter. "This isn't legal. It is recorded." "You can't do this." "I did. You promised me you wouldn't sign anything." "I told you I wouldn't." "That's the same thing." "No, it isn't." Her face hardened. "You lied to me." I considered the accusation. Yes, she looked genuinely wounded. That was the strangest part. People who manipulate others often treat resistance as betrayal. They believe deception is a privilege belonging only to the person with the better justification. Claire pressed the paper against her palm. You gave away Mom's house. It was my house. It was our family home. It was never your asset. I'm your daughter. That is a relationship, not a title instrument. Daniel stepped between us. Robert, this transaction will be reversed. On what grounds? Incapacity. Undue influence. Fraud. Take your pick. Fraud. By whom? Thomas. What did he misrepresent? He convinced you to transfer valuable property for nominal consideration. No, I proposed the amount. Daniel's expression did not change, but his eyes did. A recalculation. Then that proves incapacity. Does it? No rational person would do this. A poor bargain is not incapacity. This isn't a poor bargain. It's self-destruction. Only if the house was my sole objective. Claire stared at me. What does that mean? It means you built your plan around the assumption that I would protect the house at any cost. She held the paper more tightly. You're punishing me. No. You sold your own home to hurt me. I sold it to stop you. Her mouth opened, but no words came. For the first time since this began, the silence belonged to me. I continued. I know about the private listing. I know Denise received information from my appraisal and maintenance records. I know Daniel proposed a repurchase arrangement through one of his companies. I know you contacted my doctor, described me as confused, and began creating a record of diminished capacity. Claire shook her head slowly. That isn't what happened. It is documented. You're twisting everything. The showing was recorded. Daniel's face changed. Claire looked at him. I watched the information move between them. Not words. Assessment. Exposure. What exactly was recorded? Daniel asked. Tomorrow, Sam will provide an inventory. Claire lowered herself onto the sofa. The movement was slow, almost careful. You planned this? Yes. For how long? Since the red ribbon. She looked up sharply. What red ribbon? The one tied to the gate before the postcard arrived. Her eyes moved away. A small response, but not small enough. You knew about that, I said. No. You just remembered it. I don't know what you're talking about. You should stop saying that. It has become less convincing. Daniel placed both hands on the back of a chair. If you were competent, you would understand that transferring title does not end this. I understand that perfectly. We will file for emergency relief tonight. You may. We will challenge the deed. I expect you to. We will have Thomas restrained from selling or encumbering the property. He has already agreed not to do either without my consent. Daniel became still. You retained control, certain protective rights. Then this is a sham transaction. No. Thomas is the owner. I am the tenant. Claire's head lifted. The tenant? I signed a lease. You're paying rent to a stranger to live in your own house? It is no longer my house. The words affected her more than the sale price. I saw it then. Her anger had never been entirely about money. The house was proof of continuity, proof that Margaret's death had not rearranged the family hierarchy, proof that Claire could leave, divorce, return, and still regard the property as something waiting for her. I had removed that future without consulting her, just as she had tried to remove mine. Claire's voice dropped. You would rather give this place to a stranger than leave it to me. I would rather give it to a stranger than let my daughter take it by declaring me incompetent. Her eyes filled with tears, real ones. That did not make her innocent. Pain and wrongdoing are capable of occupying the same person. Daniel looked toward the door. We should leave. Claire did not move. I picked up my coat. 10 o'clock tomorrow. She stared at the $1 photocopy in her hand. What happens then? Then, I said, you will hear everything you thought I was too confused to understand. I walked toward the stairs. Behind me, neither of them spoke. The fire continued burning beneath the mantel, warm and orderly, while the plan they had built around me quietly collapsed. At 9:57 the next morning, Claire entered the house without knocking. She still had her key. I made a note to change the locks after the meeting. Daniel followed carrying a black leather portfolio. Denise Harrington came behind him, dressed in charcoal gray instead of cream, her expression stripped of its professional warmth. They entered the dining room and stopped. Sam sat at the far end of the table with 3 organized stacks of documents in front of him. Evelyn Price sat beside Thomas, who wore a dark suit and no tie. Dr. Anita Shaw occupied the chair nearest the window, a sealed copy of her evaluation resting on the table. I remained standing near the fireplace. No one spoke for several seconds. Claire looked at Dr. Shaw first. Who is she? My neurologist, I said. Claire's face changed, only slightly. Enough. Sam gestured toward the empty chairs. Please sit. Daniel did not move. Is this some kind of ambush? No, Sam said. An ambush requires surprise without warning. Robert invited you. Denise remained near the doorway. I was told this meeting concerned the property transaction. It does, Evelyn said. And my professional involvement, Denise added. It does. Sam repeated. Claire sat first. Daniel took the chair beside her. Denise chose the far end, leaving as much distance as possible between herself and the others. I waited until everyone was settled. Then, I sat across from my daughter. The room looked almost exactly as it had during the showing. Yellow tulips still stood in the center of the table, though several petals had curled at the edges. Claire stared at them, rather than at me. Sam opened the first folder. Before we begin, I want the purpose of this meeting to be clear. No one here is being asked to admit wrongdoing. No threats are being made. We are documenting the facts, preserving evidence, and explaining the legal consequences of any further action. Daniel leaned back. That sounds like a threat. It sounds like a boundary, I said. He looked at me. I held his gaze. Sam continued. Robert Mercer executed a valid deed transferring title to Thomas Bell. The deed was recorded yesterday at 4:23 p.m. The transaction included independent counsel for both parties, a certified appraisal, a written explanation of non-financial purpose, a leaseback agreement, full disclosure of risk, and a medical assessment of capacity. Dr. Shaw placed one hand on the sealed report. I evaluated Mr. Mercer before the signing, she said. He demonstrated full decisional capacity. Claire turned toward her. You saw him once. Yes. You don't know him. I was not asked to evaluate his personality. I was asked to evaluate his ability to understand a specific legal and financial transaction. He manipulated the test. Dr. Shaw's expression did not change. That response is common when an evaluation does not support a desired conclusion. The words landed softly. Claire looked away. Sam opened the second folder. Now we will address the evidence that led Robert to act. He placed a copy of the Harrington and Cole postcard on the table. Then the property summary. Then the unsigned authorization form naming Claire as my representative. Then the trust inquiry referring to diminished capacity. Each document appeared slowly, without commentary. Paper has a different power when no one argues over it. Daniel's jaw tightened. Denise leaned forward. I was given reason to believe Claire had verbal authority. By whom? Sam asked. Claire and Daniel. Did you verify that authority with Robert? Denise hesitated. I attempted to. By mailing promotional material to the property? That was part of a discreet marketing strategy. Did Robert request a discreet marketing strategy? No. Did he sign a listing agreement? No. Did he approve the asking range? No. Did he authorize exterior photography? Denise looked toward Claire. No. Claire spoke quickly. I told her Dad had agreed. Sam turned to her. When? We discussed it. On what date? I don't remember. Was Daniel present? Yes. Daniel looked at her. It was the same mistake they had made before, creating witnesses for conversations that had never occurred. Sam removed a small speaker from his briefcase. The showing was recorded lawfully. He pressed play. Claire's voice filled the dining room. Dad renovated parts of the room years ago. He sometimes forgets which details were original. A few seconds later, there's more storage than Dad uses now. Then, we generally coordinate through Claire to reduce stress. Denise closed her eyes briefly. Sam stopped the recording. There are 42 minutes in total. No one asked to hear more. Evelyn opened the third folder. Mr. Bell also preserved emails regarding a proposed option, allowing an entity associated with Daniel to reacquire the property after closing. She slid the printed messages across the table. Daniel did not touch them. They were exploratory, he said. Then exploring them in court should not trouble you. Evelyn replied. The room became silent again. That was the moment I had prepared for. Not a confession. Not an apology. Recognition. Claire looked at me. Her face no longer held concern, anger, or even grief. Only exhaustion. What do you want? She asked. I folded my hands. First, you will not challenge the deed. Daniel laughed once. You cannot demand that. I can explain what follows if you do. Sam spoke without looking at him. A challenge would trigger formal discovery concerning the trust inquiry, the medical narrative, the realtor authorization, the appraisal materials, and the repurchase arrangement. We would also seek fees where appropriate, I continued. Second, Denise will terminate every listing, preview, buyer contact, and marketing file related to this property. Denise nodded immediately. Yes. Third, Daniel will provide written confirmation that neither he nor any associated company has any option, right, claim, or financial arrangement involving the house. Daniel said nothing. Evelyn placed a prepared document before him. Your attorney may review it. He stared at the first page. And Claire? He asked. I looked at my daughter. She returns her key. Claire's eyes lifted. That's all? No. I paused. You will stop telling people that I am confused. Her lips pressed together. And if I'm genuinely worried, you speak to me first. You do not build a record around me. Tears gathered in her eyes again. You don't trust me. No, I said. I did not soften it. Trust is not kindness. It is a conclusion, based on evidence. She looked down at the table. Will you ever? I don't know. That answer hurt her more than anger would have. But false reassurance would only have repeated the pattern that brought us there. Claire reached into her purse, removed the brass key, and placed it beside the tulips. The sound was very small, a single piece of metal touching wood. Daniel stood. I'll have counsel contact you. Sam nodded. That is appropriate. Denise gathered her papers and left, without saying goodbye. Daniel followed. Claire remained seated. Thomas, Evelyn, Dr. Shah, and Sam quietly collected their things. One by one, they left the dining room until only my daughter and I remained. She stared at the key. Do you hate me? She asked. No, I would. That is one difference between us. She flinched. I regretted the cruelty as soon as I heard it, but I did not take it back. Some sentences cannot be polished after they are spoken. Claire stood. At the doorway, she turned. Was the house worth this? I looked around the room. At the worn table, at the curling flowers, at the space where my family had once believed itself permanent. No, I said. That was the point. She left. I listened to the front door close. Then I went upstairs and turned Margaret's photograph upright. Months later, the house still stood in Thomas Bell's name. I paid rent on the first of every month. He paid the taxes. The maple tree remained untouched. Claire called occasionally. She did that again. ND. Momo. Months later. Months. Bife. Our conversations were shorter, more careful, and finally more honest. She never apologized in a single complete sentence. People rarely do. Instead, the apology appeared in fragments and questions asked without assumptions, in silences she no longer rushed to fill, in the days she knocked before entering, even after I had eventually given her a new key. I did not sell my house for $1 because it was worthless. I sold it because they believed its value made me controllable. They thought I would accept humiliation, doubt my own mind, and surrender my rights rather than risk losing the walls around me. They misunderstood what the house represented. It was never the wood, the deed, or the market price. It was the life I had built through patience, discipline, and years of quiet work. And when they tried to use that life against me, I did what they believed I was too old, too lonely, and too confused to do. I changed the terms.